Right. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys today about livability. I'm sure you guys have all been hearing about the sort of, because, you know, I just assume you know exactly what's going on in D.C. Live in the bubble much? About how the federal government is talking a lot about livability and a lot about federal agencies working together to build complete communities. You've probably heard, if you're paying attention to this nerdy stuff like I am, the sort of Sustainable Communities Collaborative, which is Housing and Urban Development, Department of Transportation, and EPA working together, combining their funding lines. And I just want to say that the National Endowment for the Arts is also joining those efforts. We're also very much interested in what is the role of arts in the livability of communities. So everything that we heard about yesterday, I can say at the federal policy level, at the Federal Arts Agency, we are also paying attention to and want to fund and actually structurally changing the agency to be able to fund. So one thing that we did do, I'm sure you all read our new strategic plan that we released, all 100 pages of it. It was a page turner. We actually now call out livability specifically as something that someone who wants to apply for an arts grant can work on. So that's the first time ever for our agency. We actually define what it means to do livability, and we're actually also trying to figure out what it means to measure that. Not easy. So I was here today to talk about how putting creativity to work. We call all of this work that we're all talking about, it's a new term, I expect you to all start using it, creative placemaking. That's sort of what, and I'm going to give you some definitions and talk about what that means. I'm going to talk about some interventions for how you actually do creative placemaking when you look at it broadly across a lot of different initiatives. I'm just going to try to give you guys a sort of policy frame for how we think about this at the agency and how it's done. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding lines we have to support it. So, just make sure I'm in the right place. What is creative placemaking? Is Ann Godwa here this morning? Yes. There you are. Hi. Hi. Thank you, Ann, because this is her work with Ann Markison that sort of set the basis for this. If you can focus on those red words there, I think you'll all recognize that this is exactly what we've all been talking about, strategically shaping the physical and social character of a neighborhood or town, city or region around the arts and cultural activities. So why creative placemaking? Well, it's all the things that we've all been talking about, right? It animates public spaces, it rejuvenates structures and streetscapes, it improves local businesses' vitality and public safety, and it brings diverse people together to celebrate, inspire, and be inspired. All great stuff, right? And we know that it works. We've seen that it works yesterday. We all went to Juxtaposition. We know this work works. So what does successful creative placemaking have? Visionary leadership. Where's Deanna? She in here? That's a visionary leader right there, folks. It's always about what works in that place. And I'm not going to read all these bullet points, don't worry. You know, it attracts local support, and it's about supporting grassroots creative talent. When we look across how this works all across the country, all of these elements are usually there. So what are the challenges? There's lots of them. I think anybody who's done this work at the local level can speak to how difficult this work is to do. It's really God's work in some ways. You're dealing with a lot of regulatory hurdles. You're dealing with, you know, trying to find property that doesn't cost $1 gajillion in some cities. You're dealing with lack of money, lack of seed financing, lack of people understanding how to work with your audience. You know, the idea that government should support entrepreneurs within the creative industries is really a relatively new idea in America. It only goes back about 10 years. And so people are really trying to figure out how do we take these, you know, big hierarchical structures that we have and kind of shift them to really do this work. The good news is there's lots of interventions. People have kind of figured out how to do this. You know, it has been 10 years, and we've been doing a lot of things to help figure this out. So the number one intervention that everyone loves, money. Being a funder, I can say that everybody does love this. You know, at the end of the day, sometimes it's just about giving operating support to nonprofits. That's usually a clap line. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, you got to have money to do the work, right? You know, and so but I think some people are also kind of figuring out that giving grants and small microloans to creative entrepreneurs, people who aren't nonprofits, can also be just as effective. And there's been a lot of initiatives that have said, you know, if I'm trying to fund a young designer, they shouldn't have to form a nonprofit to actually get the work done. They may just need a microline to buy a plot printer. So. Now, my agency can't do that, but you do see this happening across the country in some places. So And then venture capital, right? The venture capital community in this country doesn't necessarily understand how to fund creative entrepreneurs, and that's something that I think needs some work. So this, moving away from the kind of nonprofit funding world, there have been a lot of these efforts to support the for-profit side in the creative industries from cities and from even countries. So this takes a lot of different formats, things like Create Boston and Innovation Philadelphia. Those were really about doing kind of typical business development work focused individually on these kind of industries. There's business cluster work that's happened, like in Massachusetts. I'm just pimping some of my own work up here with and the great work that happened in the state. DIGMA, the design industry group in Massachusetts, really formed a group specifically around a creative industry. And then a lot of things happen in a lot of communities that are just like, let's just get people who are in this field together for a party, right? And every time you have like this spark that happens in the Berkshires, because a lot of times these people have trouble finding each other in a community. And I tell you, every single time one of those things happens, people walk out with business and walk out with work because they may have needed a graphic designer and they actually found one finally. So, financial incentives. This is really for the city council members in the audience. I'm glad there's some here. There's a lot of things that cities themselves can do: tax incentives, lotteries, zoning overlays. A lot of this is sort of old hat at this point. A lot of the, everyone's heard about the Paducah example and the Artist Relocation Initiative, a Rudy Bruner-Loeb winner. And film tax incentives, all those kinds of things that have been going on for quite a while. There are tools that cities have that they can use besides just giving, well, this is a version of giving money, but sort of giving it in a different way. Physical infrastructure, public art, always a great thing. I won't get into it too much. I'm no expert in public art. But I think one thing a lot of people don't think about when they're trying to support this work in communities is the telecommunications infrastructure can be incredibly important. A lot of people do need access to good telecommunications infrastructure to do this work well. And it's something that I think cities, as they're talking about developing their creative and innovation economies, they need to think about, which I'm sure a lot do. This is a really important one, soft infrastructure. So this is the people infrastructure, right? This is the work, the incredible work that all these community arts organizations are doing, training young people to go into these skill sets. I had to feature Juxtaposition here because they're just doing such great work. Bill Strickland's work, legendary work at the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, or something like Youth Design in Boston, which takes inner city kids that show a promise in design and actually put them to work in a design firm for a summer, which is a great program. And then something like the Creative Challenge. This is a great program that they do out in the Berkshires, one of my favorites, where they go to a company and say, you need creative talent, right? So they went to a book printing company and said, you need creative talent. We know where all the creative people are. Create a challenge. And so they said, well, we will we were looking to create a book around some kind of farming. So anybody who can write the best book, we'll actually award that to them. So they sent it out to the entire creative community, and people applied, and they actually created a connection just through a little bit of coordination by going directly to the company, which I think is actually a really cool, simple idea. Why wait for the middleman? So, marketplace development is also really important. If you're talking about doing this work, right, you've got to let people know who's actually there in your backyard. South by Southwest is probably the most famous and important of these in the country, but these things happen all over the place. And it's about, promoting the creatives that you actually have in your backyard. If you're developing the talent at Juxtaposition Arts, how do the people that actually want to buy that talent find them? And you always have to keep that in the back of your head. So I thought I'd run just through a few space-based initiatives. I'll just do these really quick. You find all these different kinds of sort of physical initiatives that support creative placemaking work all across the country and the world. Cultural districts are probably the best well-known of these. You always see artist workspace initiatives. You see a lot of artists working in empty storefronts. I mean, these are things that have been going on for a while, but these are some more unique ones. So Design Box in Raleigh, North Carolina is a really interesting one. This is just a space where it's basically a tiny design incubator that just has like a plotting printer and a few computers, but what it gives is young designers a space to actually come together, talk about design, and be able to do design work. And it's just like a storefront. It's a really interesting little place. Sometimes these things are huge, and it's a concentration of massive businesses and creativity. Media City in Berlin is a concentration of over 150 media businesses. This is also happening in London after the Olympics. They're planning on filling the Olympic buildings with creative-based businesses. So this can happen on a gigantic scale too. Sometimes it's about just managing the workspace. This is a great project in New York City these folks just buy up industrial buildings and make sure that there continues to be cheap space for creative people to work within in Williamsburg. So sometimes it is just, this is not the most glamorous looking, creative thing, but it's absolutely essential to make sure that this work can keep continuing. The things that go on behind these walls are incredible. And then there's these new kind of interesting art science centers. Who's heard about this movement, about kind of combining artists and scientists into the same space and hoping that stuff comes out of it? So, Le Laboratoire, David, oh crap, I'm going to forget his last name. What? Edward, thank you, wrote this book, and he has these centers across the country. This one is in Paris, and he has one at Harvard now that combines scientists and artists into the same space to try to create new businesses and exchange ideas. This is a movement that's happening in a lot of places. It's sort of a direct kind of outcome from Richard Florida's work. These guys just invented Haleyville Chocolate. So I'm going to try to land it into a case study in San Francisco, because I think these guys are actually doing a lot of work. We funded this through a Mayor's Institute on City Design Award, the Mid-Market Cultural Partnership. So this is a collaboration in San Francisco among city agencies, nonprofits, urban planners, architects, everybody to kind of figure out how to deal with a very abandoned part of downtown San Francisco. What they're doing is they're trying to use the arts and design in every way they can to make this place safer and make it more, sort of bring it back on the tax rolls. So they've done really innovative large-scale lighting designs. They're trying to activate it with all kinds of visual and performing arts activities. And they're going to be hosting a major festival in this area. So this, you see, these are all kinds of the different things that I spoke about. They're going to be doing an arts market. They're going to be creating places for rest. And they're going to be doing a series of physical infrastructure streetscape improvements. They're also doing sort of artisan storefront thing. And they're doing, and then what's really interesting, actually, well, I think I want to talk about this first, actually. They also have one of those art science innovation centers that they're working on called 5M, which is the old Hearst, where's Deborah? It's the Hearst building, right? It's the old Hearst paper printing plant. They've moved in a major arts organization. They've moved in major other kinds of nonprofits. This is a fascinating project that's just getting off the ground. We just had them present this at our national council meeting. It's called 5M. So talk to Deborah. Raise your hand, Deborah. She can tell you all about it. And it's really a fascinating project. And so this kind of work is actually also happening here in America. But what's cool about what the city's done is that they've really assembled all kinds of other financing tools to really make this work happen. Besides just giving money, they're creating tax incentives for businesses that move in the district. They created low-interest loans for arts organizations that want to move into the district. They created targeted funds from the mayor's office specifically for this. They created a BID, or business improvement district, and they've also enhanced the police presence in the community. So it's sort of like shooting every gun they possibly can in this work in one place, and it'll be really interesting to kind of see how it all plays out. So, and they're producing a report on ideas and toolkits from how this works, so it'll be of use to the entire country, which will be great. So okay, I'll get into funding real quick, because that's what everybody wants to hear about. So how are we actually funding this work? Well, any of the work that I've talked about and any of the work, the kinds of work that we've spoken about is fundable by our agency, except for hard costs. We don't fund hard costs. And we have our regular granting round, which we now call Artworks. It's changed names to something called Artworks. You can see how direct we're being about this. Artworks. And then we have a new leadership program called Our Town. So I'm just going to talk, so everything that I'm going to talk about with Our Town is also fundable through Artworks. So Our Town had three sort of major funding themes. One is in planning. So you could come in for sort of cultural district and or industry planning. You could come in for artist live work facility planning or cultural facility planning, and you could come in for kind of looking regionally at your creative economy. You can also fund design, infrastructure planning and design for your community. A lot of people don't realize that if you're just having even like a general design conversation in your community, we do fund that at the agency. We fund community design initiatives. We funded Amputera. We funded lots of this work since 1967. I think a lot of people don't realize that we do fund that work at the agency. And last slide, we also, of course, always want to fund arts engagement, right? The great community programming, community arts work that's happening on the ground. That's always, always, always something that we're interested in funding as part of this work.